In the last couple of screencasts, I talked about the demand curve by itself and the supply curve by itself, but almost always from this moment forward, we're going to be talking about the demand curve and the supply curve together, because our analysis of markets investigates what are the outcomes as buyers and sellers interact in markets. And so we want to think through how a market behaves when buyers and sellers act together. And so that's the purpose of this screencast, is to start thinking about that carefully. So of course we have a graph about that, because we are economists and that's what we do. We're going to put together what we think about buyers with what we think about sellers in the short run, and then talk about where we think the market price and quantity are going to end up if they ever had enough time to settle at a stable position. Before I go on, there is an irony. We're using an equilibrium model. Of course, equilibrium is where things are at rest, to describe markets that are always changing with all these events and are pretty much never at rest. But the equilibrium model is going to give us a sense of where a particular event is going to push price, how a particular event is going to likely affect quantity in the market. That's what we use this model for, is to predict the direction of movement in price and quantity that corresponds with particular market events. All right, let's go to the graph. That's the fun part. I know you're really excited. Sorry to keep you. All right, so I've gone ahead and drawn the graph. We're going to stay with this Pakistani cucumber market in 2014. And I did verify that the rupee is indeed Pakistan's national currency. They have the Pakistani rupee, and the Indian has an Indian rupee. But they're both rupee. Sort of made a lucky guess there. All right, well, what do we know? We know that the demand curve in the short run is downward sloping. See 2 screencasts ago if you were questioning why. We know that the short run supply curve is upward sloping. All right, we got it. Now what? Which price and quantity pair is going to prevail? And of course, our eye is drawn to the point where these 2 lines, or they don't have to be straight lines. We use linear functions just because they're convenient, not because the real world is in any way, shape, or form linear. But we're drawn to this point where those 2 curves, functions, lines, whatever we want to call them, intersect. And that's going to turn out to be a good instinct. But before we get there, let's think about why. All right, let's suppose that we had a market price for the moment that was higher. We're going to call it, again, very creatively, P naught, because I don't know what a pound of cucumber sells for in rupees. So just some price higher than this price where the curves intersect. So let's just pick, and this is what we're going to talk about is true for any price above this intersection point. All right, well here notice a couple things. Remember, we can read the quantity supplied off the supply curve. That's what the supply curve does. It gives us let's call that Q1, gives us the quantity supplied at any given price. And then we'll call this quantity demanded at that price Q2. And notice something, Q1 is bigger than Q2. There is more supplied than consumers want to buy at this price. We call this, there's 2 identical words, or words that, they're different words but they mean the same thing. We call this a surplus or excess supply. Those 2 terms mean the same thing. All right, well, what happens when there's surplus? Some cucumber sellers bring all their stuff to the market, set up, they're left at the end of the day with these cucumbers that are going to go bad by tomorrow, and that's no way to make a living. So they're going to say next time, or maybe toward the end of the day, they're going to say, hey, guess what? These cucumbers are, instead of 15 rupees per pound, they're 12 rupees per pound. Anyway, anytime there's surplus or excess supply, sellers are left with this extra that they can't sell, especially for a perishable. That's not a good thing. And there's gonna be downward pressure on price. So at prices above this special intersection, we're gonna see downward pressure on price moving toward this intersection. All right, well, let's think through the case. Oh, I didn't draw it well enough, but let's just fudge it. This is still Q1, we'll call this Q2, just so I don't have to fill up the curve with the graph with an excess of lines. All right, well, let's say price falls to P1, or price is at P1, which is below this special intersection price. Well, we're going to come to have a special name for that price, but let's suppose price is below that point. Well, here notice that the quantity demanded by buyers, again Q1, that's just by convenience because I drew it that way. Buyers want to buy Q1 worth of stuff, cucumbers. Sellers only want to buy Q2. Well, you know, there's going to be a lot of buyers that want to buy but don't get it, and they're going to be frustrated. And we call this two things. Again, why have just one term when you can have two? We'll call this excess demand, or more understandable, the similar term is shortage. Either one of those terms works. They're the same meaning. All right, so now there's this shortage. Buyers want to buy more than sellers are willing to sell. Well, what's going to happen here? Well, sellers are going to notice that, geez, I opened my shop at 7 a.m. and by 7:30 I was out of cucumbers at 12 rupees per pound. Well, geez, tomorrow maybe I can set up and charge 18 rupees per pound, make a little extra money for my family. And, you know, I'm fine as long as I clear my stock by the end of the day, say 5 o'clock, whatever. So sellers are going to notice that shortage, that buyer behavior. People come in all day asking for cucumbers and they don't have any. Tomorrow they're going to set a higher price for those. So, and also buyers are going to say, hey, you know, I'd rather actually get some cucumbers, even if I have to pay a little bit more. Why don't you save me some tomorrow and I'll pay a little higher price? So buyers are part of this dynamic too. So if there's ever a price below this point where these two functions intersect, we have upward pressure on price. And so we come to call, I'm even going to use a special color, different color, not necessarily special. We will call this price and quantity pair where these two curves intersect, and I know they're straight lines and I'm calling them curves. We'll call this P, I'll even label it PE instead of P2, which would normally be my habit. PE and QE, that's the equilibrium price, the equilibrium quantity. That's where every buyer that wants to buy a pound of cucumbers at the going price gets to. Every seller that wants to sell a pound of cucumber at the going price gets to. There's no shortage, there's no surplus. Everybody that wants to sell can, everybody that wants to buy can. So we call this the equilibrium price, and again, why have one term for things when you could have two? I also will call this the market clearing. That's an NG at the end of that word. Price and quantity. Either one of those terms means the same. All right. That's market equilibrium. I see that I'm going way over the 5-minute videos that I promised you, and I am sorry, but I'm nailing the finer points for you, and I know you're eager to know those.
Made with Doodlecast Pro.